It was February 13th, 2017, a day like any other in the small, serene town of Delphi, Indiana. The sky above was a pale gray, the kind of winter canvas that seemed to mute the world below. A light breeze whispered through the bare branches of towering trees, carrying with it the crisp scent of cold earth and dried leaves. Snow still lingered in patches along the ground, but the sun occasionally peeked through, teasing a hint of warmth. For Abigail Williams and Liberty German, the day was perfect for an adventure. The best friends, just 13 and 14 years old, had an unbreakable bond built on shared laughs, endless talks, and a mutual love for exploring the outdoors. That Monday, with school out for the day, they decided to spend their afternoon hiking along the Monon High Bridge Trail, a popular spot known for its breathtaking views and peaceful surroundings. As they walked along the path, their footsteps crunching against the frosty ground, the towering Monon High Bridge loomed ahead, a relic of the past, its weathered beams stretching high above Deer Creek. The girls marveled at its rugged beauty, capturing photos on Liberty's phone to remember the moment. The air was quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a bird or the distant rustle of branches swaying in the wind. They laughed and chatted as they made their way closer to the bridge, their young spirits filled with the thrill of exploration. To them, it was just another day of freedom and fun, a chance to escape the ordinary and immerse themselves in nature. But hidden within that peaceful stillness was an undercurrent of something far darker, something neither they nor anyone else in Delphi could have foreseen. The sun dipped lower in the sky as the hours passed. The footage was shaky, but its significance would echo far beyond the moment it was captured. Liberty German, with a sense of intuition that still stuns those who hear her story, had pulled out her phone and pressed record. On the screen was the image of a man walking toward them on the Monon High Bridge. His posture was unhurried, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. The bridge, weathered and uneven, creaked faintly beneath his boots. Though his face was obscured by the angle and shadow, his presence radiated unease. Then came the voice. Low and deliberate, it carried over the quiet air, down the hill. These words, chilling in their simplicity, would become infamous, a haunting fragment of the final moments of Abigail and Liberty's lives. When the girls failed to return home that evening, their families' worry quickly turned to panic. Calls and messages went unanswered. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the trails into darkness, search parties began to comb the area. Flashlights flickered through the trees, and voices called out into the night. The tight-knit community of Delphi rallied together, but as hours stretched into the early morning, a heavy sense of dread began to settle over everyone involved. By the time dawn broke on February 14th, hope had given way to fear. What had begun as a typical winter day had unraveled into a waking nightmare, one that would leave an indelible mark on all who lived it. The morning air was cold and heavy with unease as volunteers and law enforcement combed through the wooded area near the trail. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves brought a flicker of hope, but each discovery turned out to be nothing more than debris scattered by winter winds. The search party moved methodically, driven by a shared urgency, but also a growing sense of dread. Late in the morning of February 14th, their worst fears were realized. Near a shallow creek just a short distance from the Monon High Bridge, the lifeless bodies of Abigail Williams and Liberty German were discovered. The scene was both heartbreaking and horrifying. The vibrant, adventurous girls who had set out to explore the trails had met a tragic and violent end. The news spread quickly through Delphi, shattering the peaceful facade of the small town. Shock turned to grief, and grief soon gave way to fear. How could something so heinous happen here, in this quiet place where everyone knew everyone? The sense of safety that had long defined Delphi was replaced with an overwhelming unease. Doors that were once left unlocked were now bolted shut. Parents who had let their children roam freely now held them closer than ever. As investigators descended on the scene, the community's collective grief turned into a desperate plea for answers. Who could commit such a brutal act, and why Abigail and Liberty? These questions would linger unanswered as the search for justice began. The ripple effect of the tragedy was immediate and profound. Delphi, a town where everyone knew everyone, became a place of suspicion and unease overnight. Families who had once felt safe letting their children roam the trails now clung to them tightly, afraid of an unseen predator lurking among them. The grief was palpable. Candlelight vigils illuminated the nights as hundreds gathered to honor Abigail and Liberty. Tears fell freely, mingling with whispered prayers and desperate pleas for answers. Local churches opened their doors, offering solace and a place for the community to grieve together. The fear was just as pervasive. Conversations shifted to hushed tones, and eyes lingered on neighbors longer than before. Could it have been someone they knew? The possibility that the killer might be one of their own gnawed at the town's collective psyche. Delphi's tight-knit community felt fractured, each person wrestling with their own grief, fear, and suspicion. Despite the darkness that enveloped the town, one thing was clear: Delphi would not let this tragedy define them. Residents rallied together, determined to support the families and aid in the investigation in any way they could. Flyers bearing the girls' photos and the now infamous phrase "down the hill" appeared in every shop window and on every street corner. A reward fund was quickly established, growing with donations from both locals and strangers who were moved by the heartbreaking story. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the lack of answers began to weigh heavily on the town. The once bustling streets now carried an eerie stillness, a silence that spoke of heartbreak and a community holding its breath. Delphi had been forever changed, its innocence stolen along with the lives of two young girls. The evidence released to the public was both crucial and deeply unsettling. It began with the short video Liberty German had captured on her phone. The clip, though brief, showed a man walking toward the girls on the Monon High Bridge. His gait was deliberate, his hands tucked into the pockets of a dark jacket. The grainy footage offered only a partial view of his face, leaving much to interpretation. Accompanying the video was an audio clip that sent chills down the spine of everyone who heard it. The voice, calm, almost commanding, uttered the now infamous words, "Down the hill." It was a cryptic command that offered no context, only fear and endless speculation about what came next. To aid in the investigation, police also released two composite sketches of the suspect. The first sketch depicted a middle-aged man with a hat and beard, while the second, released 2 years later, showed a younger, clean-shaven individual. The stark differences between the two sketches left the public confused and frustrated, but investigators insisted both were vital pieces of the puzzle. Despite these haunting clues, the man on the bridge remained unidentified. The voice, the images, and the sketches became symbols of the mystery, replayed and analyzed endlessly by both law enforcement and the public. Each new revelation added another layer to the case, but it also deepened the despair of a community desperate for answers. As the investigation pressed on, one chilling fact became clear. The evidence, though compelling, was not enough to immediately unmask the killer. The haunting fragments left behind the video, the voice, and the sketches would continue to cast a shadow over the town of Delphi, a constant reminder of the evil that had stolen Abigail and Liberty from their loved ones. As the months passed without an arrest, the Delphi murders became a national obsession. Online communities dedicated to solving true crime cases seized on the mystery, dissecting every fragment of evidence made public. The video, the audio clip, and the suspect sketches became the focus of endless speculation and analysis. Reddit forums and Facebook groups sprang up, their members numbering in the tens of thousands. Amateurs and armchair detectives pored over the footage, debating the man's gait, his clothing, and even the shadows cast by the bridge. The audio clip of Down the Hill was slowed down, sped up, and enhanced in every possible way as online sleuths searched for clues hidden in the suspect's tone or inflection. While some efforts were commendable, compiling timelines, mapping out the area, and tracking leads, others crossed into dangerous territory. Innocent people were publicly accused, their names dragged through the mud based on nothing more than a vague resemblance to the sketches or a misunderstood comment on social media. The sheer volume of tips, many spurred by online speculation, overwhelmed investigators, forcing them to sift through mountains of irrelevant or outright false information. Law enforcement acknowledged the double-edged sword of public involvement. On one hand, the widespread attention kept the case in the spotlight, ensuring it wasn't forgotten. On the other, the flood of amateur theories and unfounded accusations often created more obstacles than solutions. For the families of Abigail and Liberty, the online frenzy was bittersweet. They were grateful for the continued attention, but wary of the harm caused by misinformation and baseless accusations. Still, they clung to hope that somewhere within the digital noise, a crucial piece of evidence might surface, something that could finally bring justice for the girls. The case of the Delphi murders had transcended its small-town origins, becoming a symbol of both the power and the pitfalls of online true crime communities. As the world watched, the search for answers continued, driven by a mix of determination, obsession, and a shared desire to see justice served. The initial investigation into the Delphi murders was marked by frustration and disappointment. Within days of the girls' bodies being discovered, law enforcement was flooded with tips from across the nation. Calls poured in, each one promising a lead that might break the case open. But as investigators sifted through the information, a troubling pattern emerged. Nothing seemed to stick. Early suspects were questioned, their names appearing in headlines and circulating through social media. Some were local men with known criminal records, others were individuals spotted near the Monon High Bridge on the day of the murders. Each lead, at first promising, eventually fizzled out. Alibis checked out. Evidence didn't match. The search seemed to be chasing shadows. As the days turned into weeks, frustration mounted among both investigators and the public. The sheer volume of information overwhelmed the police, yet none of it brought them closer to identifying the man in the video or deciphering the meaning behind the chilling words, "Down the hill." The lack of progress left the community feeling defeated. With every dead end, the possibility that the killer might escape justice loomed larger. The investigation pressed on, but the trail seemed to grow colder with each passing day. In July of 2017, several months after the murders, police released the first composite sketch of the suspect. It depicted a man with a round face, slightly scruffy facial hair, and a cap pulled low over his forehead. The sketch was based on eyewitness accounts from the day of the murders and the limited information gleaned from Liberty's video. For a moment, hope surged through the town of Delphi. Flyers featuring the sketch were posted in public spaces, shared on social media, and aired on national news broadcasts. Residents scrutinized the faces of neighbors and strangers alike, searching for even the faintest resemblance to the composite image. But as time passed, the impact of the sketch began to wane. No arrests followed its release. The suspect's identity remained a mystery, and the community's initial burst of optimism was replaced by lingering doubt. Had the sketch truly captured the killer's likeness, or was it just another piece of the puzzle that refused to fit? Speculation ran wild. Online forums lit up with theories, each more intricate than the last. Some believed the sketch bore a striking resemblance to someone they knew. Others questioned whether it even represented the same man seen in the video. The release of the first sketch, while significant, ultimately deepened the mystery surrounding the Delphi murders. For investigators, it was a necessary step forward, but for the public, it was a stark reminder of just how far they still had to go to find answers. In April of 2019, 2 years after the murders, investigators released a second composite sketch of the suspect. The new image was strikingly different from the first. Gone was the older man with a round face and a cap. The second sketch depicted a much younger individual with sharper features, no facial hair, and a hooded expression. The dramatic shift baffled the public. How could the suspect's appearance change so drastically? Had the investigation taken a wrong turn, or was this a breakthrough? Speculation ran rampant. Some believed the second sketch indicated a fresh lead, while others feared it signaled that investigators were grasping at straws. Law enforcement clarified that the second sketch was not a replacement but a new interpretation based on updated witness accounts and further analysis. They urged the public to view both sketches as part of the evolving investigation, each offering pieces to the larger puzzle. But for many, the release of the second sketch raised more questions than answers. Was the investigation backtracking, or had it finally found its footing? Despite the confusion, the release reignited public interest in the case. The second sketch, like the first, became a symbol of the mystery, shared widely across social media and featured in news reports nationwide. Yet, even with renewed attention, the man in the sketch remained elusive, and the trail seemed as cold as ever. Why were Abigail Williams and Liberty German targeted? It was a question that haunted their families, investigators, and the community. Theories ranged from the horrifyingly random to the chillingly calculated. One possibility was that the girls were victims of an opportunistic predator. The Monon High Bridge Trail, while scenic, was also secluded. Perhaps the suspect had been lurking in the area, waiting for a chance encounter with someone vulnerable. The randomness of such an attack only deepened the fear gripping Delphi. Others speculated that the crime was premeditated. Did the suspect know the girls or their families? Could the video and audio captured by Liberty suggest the man was following them with a specific intent? The chilling words "down the hill" hinted at a plan, but what it was and why the girls were chosen remained unclear. As the investigation continued, the lack of clear answers allowed speculation to flourish. Theories about the motive varied wildly, from revenge to abduction gone wrong. Yet, for all the conjecture, the true reason behind the tragedy remained shrouded in mystery. The haunting question of why kept the case alive in the minds of many, drawing attention from both professional investigators and amateur sleuths. It was a question that demanded answers, but for the families of Abigail and Liberty, it was a wound that refused to heal. Each day without clarity only deepened the ache of their loss, while the search for truth pressed on, one step at a time. The small town of Delphi found itself at the center of a storm. The idea that the killer could be someone among them was a shadow that loomed over the community, touching every conversation and interaction. Suspicion seeped into the tight-knit fabric of the town, turning neighbors into potential suspects in the eyes of one another. Residents who had grown up together began second-guessing their trust in those they had known for years. Whispers circulated about anyone who seemed out of the ordinary or avoided talking about the case. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. The thought that a predator could be walking among them, hiding in plain sight, was too much for many to bear. Community events carried a somber tone, and the once vibrant town felt muted. Delphi's charm, built on familiarity and safety, was replaced with an air of uncertainty and fear. While law enforcement urged residents to remain vigilant but calm, the unspoken truth was evident. The killer could very well be one of their own. This suspicion wasn't unfounded. In small towns like Delphi, crimes of this nature are almost always committed by someone with local ties. The chilling possibility that the person responsible for such a heinous act was watching the investigation unfold, blending into the crowd, made the weight of the tragedy even heavier. Delphi was no longer just a town grieving the loss of two of its daughters. It was a town holding its breath, waiting for answers that seemed just out of reach. In October of 2022, After years of painstaking investigation, a breakthrough shocked the quiet town of Delphi. Authorities announced the arrest of Richard Allen, a 50-year-old resident who had lived in Delphi for most of his life. Allen was described as a quiet, unassuming man, the kind of person who blended into the background. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. How could someone so ordinary be linked to such an extraordinary crime? Allen had worked at a local CVS pharmacy and was known to many in town. He had even interacted with some of the families affected by the tragedy, offering condolences and support. The idea that he could be connected to the murders was almost too much to process. Details surrounding Allen's arrest were initially scarce, adding to the mystique of the case. Authorities emphasized that the investigation was ongoing and that more information would be released in time. For now, Richard Allen was, by all accounts, an unremarkable figure in the quiet town of Delphi, Indiana. Born and raised in the area, he had lived most of his 50 years within its close-knit community. To neighbors and acquaintances, he seemed the epitome of small-town normalcy, a dependable employee, a devoted husband, and an unassuming presence who rarely drew attention to himself. Allen worked at the local CVS pharmacy, where his friendly demeanor and professionalism made him a trusted face. He interacted regularly with residents, even printing photos for families of Abby Williams and Liberty German in the days following their tragic deaths. It was a disturbing irony that someone so close to the case, someone who had offered his condolences, could now stand accused of such heinous crimes. Despite being a local, Allen managed to stay off the radar of investigators for years. His name never surfaced as a person of interest in the early stages of the case. So why was he overlooked? Was it his ability to blend into the fabric of the community, his lack of a prior criminal record, or simply a lack of evidence at the time? One detail began to emerge. Allen was known to frequent the Monon High Bridge Trail, the very location where the girls had been last seen. He lived just a short drive from the site, and locals recalled seeing him there on occasion. However, with no concrete evidence tying him to the crime scene in 2017, investigators had no reason to suspect him, at least not initially. As the community processed the shock of his arrest, questions began to swirl about Allen's potential motives. Could he have been a calculated predator who used his unassuming demeanor to mask a darker nature? Or was he someone who had stumbled into an unspeakable situation? The lack of a clear motive left the case shrouded in mystery, deepening the sense of unease that lingered over Delphi. The breakthrough in the case came not from a sudden confession or eyewitness account, but from new evidence reportedly uncovered during a search of Richard Allen's home. The details of this evidence remain sealed, but whispers of its significance have fueled widespread speculation. What could they have found after all these years? Investigators hinted that advances in forensic technology and a meticulous re-examination of the crime scene played pivotal roles in connecting Allen to the murders. Some sources suggested that a piece of physical evidence, a weapon, an article of clothing, or perhaps DNA might have linked him directly to the area where Abby and Libby were discovered. Others speculated about the possible recovery of digital evidence, such as data from Allen's devices that placed him near the trail on that fateful day. The strength of the case against Allen remains a subject of debate. While authorities exude confidence in their findings, the decision to keep the evidence under wraps has left both the public and legal experts questioning its solidity. Could it be the smoking gun that finally brings justice to Abby and Libby, or would it crumble under scrutiny in court? As the investigation unfolds, the community watches with bated breath. For many, the arrest of Richard Allen marks a turning point, a glimmer of hope in a case that had grown cold. Yet the mystery surrounding the evidence against him serves as a reminder that the road to justice is rarely straightforward. The true weight of the revelations remains to be seen, leaving Delphi in a fragile state of anticipation and dread. As details of Richard Allen's arrest began to surface, a provocative question emerged. Was he acting alone? For years, speculation about the Delphi murders had included theories that more than one person might have been involved. The possibility added an unsettling layer to an already harrowing case. Some theorists pointed to the complexity of the crime. How had someone been able to commit such a heinous act in broad daylight on a well-traveled trail without being seen? Could Allen have had help either in planning the crime, carrying it out, or concealing evidence afterward? Investigators have remained tight-lipped about this possibility, neither confirming nor denying the involvement of additional suspects. A few details have fueled these suspicions. Early in the investigation, authorities had suggested that the crime scene contained elements suggesting a level of sophistication or premeditation that might be difficult for one person to achieve alone. Additionally, the delay in identifying Allen raised questions. Had someone else been working in the shadows to divert attention, manipulate evidence, or shield him from suspicion? Public speculation reached a fever pitch when investigators hinted that the arrest of Allen did not mean the case was fully closed. Was this an indication of other suspects? Or was it simply a recognition that more pieces of the puzzle, such as motive and opportunity, still needed to be uncovered? As the legal proceedings against Allen progress, these lingering questions remain at the forefront of the community's mind. Could there still be someone out there who knows more than they've admitted? If so, justice for Abby and Libby may require an even deeper dive into the darkness surrounding this case. The arrest of Richard Allen sent shockwaves through Delphi, stirring a range of emotions among its residents. Relief was palpable after years of uncertainty. The idea that a suspect had been identified brought hope that justice might finally be served. For the families of Abby and Libby, it was a moment of bittersweet progress, a small step closer to answers they had been seeking for more than 5 years. Yet relief was far from the only reaction. Disbelief rippled through the town as people grappled with the reality of Allen's arrest. Many had interacted with him regularly, never suspecting that he could be involved in such a horrific crime. The idea that someone so ordinary, so ingrained in the community's daily life, might be responsible was difficult to process. It raised uncomfortable questions about how well anyone really knew their neighbors. For some, the arrest only deepened their vigilance. The case had left an indelible mark on Delphi, shaking the town's sense of safety to its core. Even with a suspect in custody, many residents couldn't help but wonder if there were more revelations yet to come. The possibility of other perpetrators or lingering dangers kept doors locked and eyes watchful. Despite the emotional turbulence, Delphi showed remarkable resilience. The town rallied around the families of Abby and Libby, continuing to honor their memory with vigils, fundraisers, and tributes. The arrest may have marked a turning point, but it was not the end of the community's journey. Delphi remained united in its determination to seek justice, find closure, and reclaim the sense of peace that had been stolen along with the lives of two vibrant young girls. The arrest of Richard Allen marked a significant milestone, but it was only the beginning of what promises to be a long and arduous road to justice. As legal proceedings unfold, the prosecution faces a formidable task, piecing together a case that can withstand the scrutiny of a courtroom and the defense's inevitable challenges. One of the prosecution's main hurdles is the passage of time. Nearly 6 years separate the crime from Allen's arrest, and memories fade, witnesses move away, and evidence can degrade. Prosecutors must rely heavily on the material evidence reportedly found during the investigation, the details of which remain sealed. Whatever this evidence may be, it must be strong enough to link Allen directly to the murders of Abby Williams and Liberty German beyond any reasonable doubt. Another challenge lies in addressing the questions that remain unanswered. What was Allen's motive? Did he act alone, or could others have been involved? The prosecution's ability to provide a clear and compelling narrative to the jury will be critical, especially given the emotional weight of the case. Without a solid explanation for why and how the crime occurred, defense attorneys could exploit gaps in the story to sow doubt. The legal process also carries the burden of ensuring fairness, a daunting task in a case so saturated with public attention. The court must carefully navigate pretrial publicity and the heightened emotions surrounding the case to ensure an impartial jury is selected. Any missteps could open the door to appeals or even jeopardize the trial's outcome. For the families of Abby and Libby, the trial represents both a step forward and a daunting prospect. The search for justice is far from over, and the emotional toll of reliving the tragedy through the court's meticulous dissection of evidence and testimony will be immense. While the arrest of Richard Allen brings a glimmer of hope, the journey toward a definitive resolution remains fraught with challenges. From the moment news of the Delphi murders broke, online communities became deeply entwined with the case. True crime enthusiasts, armchair detectives, and social media users quickly took to platforms like Reddit, YouTube, and Facebook to discuss every detail. The video and audio clip captured by Liberty German became the centerpiece of countless theories, with users dissecting every frame and sound bite for clues. On one hand, the internet brought unprecedented attention to the case. The widespread sharing of the suspect's sketches and video footage ensured that the story remained in the public consciousness, potentially encouraging tips that might otherwise have been overlooked. Online fundraisers and awareness campaigns also provided support to the families of Abby and Libby, showing the power of community in times of tragedy. However, the internet's role wasn't without complications. The same platforms that spread awareness also became breeding grounds for misinformation and baseless accusations. Innocent people were publicly named and scrutinized, their lives upended by false allegations born of little more than a resemblance to the suspect's sketches or an unfortunate social media post. Law enforcement had to wade through a deluge of irrelevant tips, many spurred by online speculation, which diverted valuable resources away from the core investigation. This duality of the internet's influence highlights the fine line between helpful engagement and harmful interference. While the case's online visibility kept it from fading into obscurity, the spread of unverified information often muddied the waters, creating new challenges for investigators and potentially complicating the path to justice. As the trial approaches, the internet's impact continues to loom large. Public opinion shaped by years of online discussion could influence jury selection, and the digital footprint of Richard Allen, should it become a factor in the proceedings, will likely draw intense scrutiny. The internet has proven to be both a powerful ally and a potential obstacle in the pursuit of justice, underscoring the complexities of investigating high-profile cases in the digital age. As the case against Richard Allen progresses, some of the most haunting questions remain unanswered, keeping the shadow of uncertainty hanging over the Delphi murders. At the heart of the mystery is the question of why. Why were Abby Williams and Liberty German targeted? Was their encounter with a suspect purely coincidental, a result of being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was there a deeper, more sinister motive behind the crime? The randomness of the attack, if true, only deepens the tragedy. The Monon High Bridge Trail was a beloved spot for locals, a place of natural beauty and peace. The idea that this serene setting could be marred by such horror leaves an indelible scar on the community. If the crime was not random, then the unanswered questions multiply. What was Alan's connection to the girls, if any? Did he know them or their families in some capacity? Equally perplexing is the delay in identifying Allen as a suspect. For years, he lived openly in Delphi, continuing his daily routine and interacting with the very community shattered by the crime. How did he evade suspicion for so long? Did he make mistakes that were overlooked in the early stages of the investigation, or was his ability to blend in simply that effective? And if others were involved, are they still out there, potentially posing a threat? The lack of clear answers keeps the Delphi murders firmly rooted in the realm of unresolved mysteries. For the families of Abby and Libby, these lingering questions add another layer of anguish to their grief. For investigators, they represent a challenge that must be met to ensure justice is fully served. The Delphi murders have left a profound and lasting impact not only on the town of Delphi, but also on the broader world of true crime. What began as a small town tragedy has become a global cautionary tale, a reminder of the fragility of life and the hidden dangers that can lurk even in the safest seeming places. In Delphi, the scars of the tragedy run deep. The community's sense of safety has been forever altered, but so too has its resilience and unity. Neighbors who once left their doors unlocked now take extra precautions, yet they continue to rally around the families of Abby and Libby, showing that even in the face of darkness, there is strength in togetherness. The case has also sparked broader conversations about how communities can better protect themselves. How can law enforcement and the public work together more effectively? What lessons can be learned from the long road to identifying Richard Allen as a suspect? And how can the media and online communities balance the pursuit of justice with the need for accuracy and respect for those affected? As the legal process unfolds, the world watches, holding its breath for the answers that may finally bring closure. For true crime enthusiasts, the case serves as a stark reminder of the real lives behind the headlines: families forever changed, communities left to grapple with the aftermath. In the end, the legacy of the Delphi murders is one of both loss and hope. It is a story of unimaginable tragedy, but also of the enduring fight for justice and the strength of a community determined to remember and honor two vibrant young girls. Now, the question is yours to ponder. Do you believe Richard Allen is guilty? Could there be others involved? And most importantly, what can we do as individuals and as a society to ensure that tragedies like this are prevented in the future while supporting those left in their wake?